Welcome to the Edge of Greatness podcast. The path to greatness is never linear and requires patience and consistency. Join us on our journey as we peel back the layers of success, searching for that elusive core. Each week we will explore a different component of greatness, utilizing experts who have traveled some part of the path that we are all on. We aim to uncover insights into the areas of leadership, coaching, performance, overcoming failure, the power of habits, and so much more. We are all on the edge of greatness. Hello and welcome to another episode of Edge of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Charles Schultz, and today I have a special guest with us, TJ Wharton. He is currently the Maryville College recruiting and performance coordinator for the baseball program there. He's spent the last 5 years working professionally, collegiately, as well as with one of the highest high school level facilities in the United States with IMG. To touch a little bit on this, we've got the Yankees on here. We've got some college summer stuff with the Licking County Settlers, which is the Great Lakes League here. Not to mention IMG, which is, I mean, if you follow sports at all, you know what IMG is all about, and that's some pretty awesome stuff there. And now one of the assistant coaches at a Division III school in, is it Pennsylvania? Is that where it's located?
No, we're Tennessee, just south.
Tennessee. Okay. All right. So I met TJ with during his master's program at OU. We were both in the same class, so that was a good opportunity for me to get to connect with him. And then he also got to coach with one of my former colleagues, Ray Noe, and he speaks very highly of you, by the way. So I wanted to reach out and connect with you and talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing right now with COVID restrictions, how you're inspiring kids and young people to get better yourself as well, because as I've looked at your resume here, you're climbing the ladder pretty quick, which is awesome. And I'm sure you've got even bigger goals for yourself set going forward. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I'll try not to take too much away from you because I know you probably got a busy schedule, but welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me on.
So first, what I want to do is I want to dig into what it's like to as a life of a college coach. Every level is obviously different and every person's experiences are unique, but I know being a college coach is a huge ask, and there's a lot of time commitments, a lot of sacrifices you have to make. So I kind of want to know, what's a typical day look like for you as a Division III recruiting coordinator, as well as doing the strength and conditioning piece, and kind of how's that look for you?
Normal day for me personally, I have to give a big shout out to my head coach Clint Helton, because he kind of allows me to do what I want. And I think that's huge for any program, is to give your assistants freedom. So there's no set time where I have to be anywhere other than practice. But so I usually come in, have a coffee with my wife and come in a little after 9, something like that. And basically whatever's at the top of my mind is what I'm going to tackle. It's because like I said, I've got a lot of different duties going on. So whatever's at the top of my brain, whether it's strength conditioning, which has been a big aspect of what's going on in COVID. I've been focusing a lot on that. And we actually, during this time, we've got a lot of new toys. So, and that was my job with the Yankees. So we got Rapsodo, drive-on track, all this stuff. So that's what I've been currently working on, is, working on those platforms. And then also just figuring out how to make their lives better during this time too, because it's, we got to really understand that it's not about wins and losses right now, because everyone's going through a tough time.
No, yeah, that's absolutely right. A lot of kids lost their seasons, especially in the spring sports, which is tough because, as a college athlete yourself, I mean, I couldn't imagine if I was, starting the season and all of a sudden like, all right, you're done. You got to go home now, and how you handle that and keep the kids to continue to want to work and do that sort of thing. So you mentioned COVID a little bit, and you got some new toys, which is kind of awesome. But how has COVID changed how you have to operate from a Division III standpoint?
I was telling you earlier, so in the beginning it was really tough, because We were doing really good as a program. We were won 9 in a row. We were 14-5. We led Division III in hits and runs. We had 2 seniors that were on track to be All-Americans, and then we get shut down. And that was the worst part about this whole thing is that Division III athletes, we don't give athletic scholarship, and we didn't have a master's program, so there was literally nowhere for those seniors to go. So we had a guy leading the country in hits, and he just had to go on. He got his degree, didn't have a chance to finish up, but that was really tough to begin with. But ever since the ending there and helping those guys get over that, we've been probably the best off of any college level, because we never got shut down for recruiting. We have had a pretty functional fall through our guidelines, and we're actually starting to scrimmage now. So after that initial extreme rough patch, getting our seniors through that time period, it's we've fared pretty well.
So what were some of the things that you did to help the seniors and some of those that were moving on? Obviously, when some journey ends, something else opens up and begins. I'm curious as to how you were helping them transition between either being a college athlete and then being an adult, or trying to find another avenue to play even. What were you kind of working with them?
My relationship with them, I obviously wish I had more time with them, but I didn't even have a full year. So a lot of my relationship was based around baseball, and I kind of used that as an avenue to tackle to, if they wanted to continue playing, I was going to make sure that was going to happen. And one of the things that I had already been lining up previous to that was there was a couple guys that I thought had a chance to play independent baseball. So one of those guys that was going to be an All-American, he actually went to United Shores League in Michigan. So he got to play independent baseball, and he's going to have a workout with the Diamondbacks here in February. So really proud of him on that end.
Awesome.
Derek Kurt's his name. Then we had a pitcher. His name's Anthony Rodriguez. He was a lefty that's been up to 93 for us. And he had pretty good academics, and we kind of waited out because he had the option to go to that league as well. But I told him, in the long run of things, I think it would be more beneficial for you to go trying to find a master's program and, get some of that education paid for. And he ended up getting to Kennesaw State. So
awesome.
And I'd like to highlight that because it's a phenomenal story of where this kid, he came from Miami. Oh man, I'm a butcher. I forget what high school. Phenomenal program down there, but never played high school baseball. He never pitched anything for the varsity program. And, some people like to say don't get caught up in the divisions, but for that kid, I felt an imperative to try to get him to Division I, because that's just really cool. And he's worked his butt off, and just to be able to say he was a Division I athlete, I think that'll mean a lot for him going in life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a really awesome story of overcoming some serious odds, considering you didn't play as a high school athlete to then being a now Division I athlete. That's quite the story for sure. So, digging a little more into your coaching, specifically, what areas are solely yours on your team? Like, do they hand you the reins to stuff that say, okay, this is you and you're going to run with it, and don't worry about what we have to say with this. This is all your area. What's kind of your sole, I guess, area of expertise when it comes to your program?
Yeah, so right now at Maryville, the two things that I kind of run the show on are strength conditioning and hitting. Those are two things that I kind of take the lead and run with those on.
Okay. And you got your CSCS, not long ago, right? Recently?
Yeah, March 2019.
Awesome. And then what are some of the areas in which you think strength and conditioning truly benefits you as an athlete, but then also as what's the way I'm trying to describe this here, is how the mind works to overcome difficulties and failure? How do you feel the weight room kind of translates onto the field from that perspective?
I love that question, because that's been a huge weight on my mind here lately, especially with what's going on. But I'll start off with how the weight room benefits us on the field. And the biggest thing is that there's a ton of people are now recognizing that it's when you're talking mechanics and hitting, any of these things, pitching, all that, it's more of a domino effect. And a lot of the beginning factors of working on stuff on the field is having correct movement. So if we don't have a correct hinge pattern in baseball, whether it's pitching, hitting, defense, all of that, if we don't know how to hinge, we're going to have a tough time creating good mechanics. So that's been the biggest thing. We're blessed to have a phenomenal weight room here. And one of the things that I really got going with our guys was working on proper movement. I did it as simple as creating a good overhead squat and a good single leg squat. And I saw enormous benefits from that. So just working on those initial movements within any part of baseball, that's the biggest thing I've seen the transition from the weight room to the baseball field. But to answer that second question, as far as mentally, I think there's so many things. I remember, you might not remember this, but when we were in that program together at OU, I wasn't nearly in the mental place that I am now. I've grown a ton over these past 2 years when it comes to, looking outside and actually learning how to educate myself properly, like how I learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I said something in a blog post about like, oh, I don't do much overhead stuff with my baseball players. And you're like, oh, why is that? And I mean, I guess that might've been one of the first pins to where I just, anytime, because there's a ton of great guys out there like Eric Cressy and all those guys.
Oh,
And they post great information, but they also say a lot of things that to not do. And I kind of just took that as is. I just like, oh, well, Cressy said not to do it, so I'm not going to do it. and that's not necessarily the right thing to do. You got to explore what you feel inside, because personally, I'm not where I want to be body composition wise, and I just stopped running because of I think you can test this, but running poles in distance has been completely vilified in baseball. And I kind of took that away from myself. But when I started running again and realized the mental benefits from it, I'm like, why is this completely taken out? Especially during this time of COVID, because these guys are just sitting down doing nothing a lot of the day, and they need to get that mind going, especially for Zoom calls, for their Zoom classes and everything like that. So who am I to say that even if, say that you lose a half a mile an hour on your fastball, but you are attentive for over 50% more Zoom calls than you were before, that's what really matters, especially at my level.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I love that, because we get stuck sometimes looking at things in definites. Exactly this or do that, and there's no gray area in between. And that's the one big thing that I always try to do now that I didn't necessarily do maybe prior to the Masters, but is the question. So when somebody says that they don't ever do something, well, why not? I really don't know, because if there is legitimacy to why you're not doing something, then sure, yeah, that makes sense. Let's not do that. But a lot of times it's like you said, well, because somebody said this here and I believe them to say it as fact, and I'm going to follow them. And I didn't really do my own thing. I just said this guy's right or that guy's right, and we went forward with it. And then over time, the person who you're talking to is so far down the line of I'm not going to do it that they don't even know why they're not doing it. They just heard it somewhere and it just became a thing. So I love that you're opening up the education avenue of well, let's see what else I can learn, because I've been following a lot of your tweets and what you're doing with the training stuff, and I love the outdoor stuff and how you're implementing different movements, because I totally agree with you on the building from the ground up and moving the right way makes a much more phenomenal athlete. One of my big favorite sayings is, when you put a square tires on a Ferrari, it's not really a Ferrari anymore.
Yeah.
So you got to have the right tools, you got to have the right movements, and that's awesome. So good stuff there. Let's continue to move this forward here, because I got some really cool stuff that's going to feed off of the dealing with failure and overcoming some of the stuff that they're going through right now. But what areas do you feel are most important for you when it comes to teaching your athletes? Let's start with in sport for baseball specifically. What do you feel is, if you had to break down one thing to teach your athlete and that was the only thing you could teach them? Now, obviously you've got more time than that, but let's say there was like a specific thing where you're like, okay, I can only teach you one thing. What's that for baseball?
Learning how to deal with failure, for sure. That's a huge thing because it has to do with the way that I believe that I train hitting. It has to do with learning to have a successful series, to game after game, and having failure, then succeeding. Life, because you're never going to get where you want to be until you learn how to take things from failure and bring them to your success. So definitely teaching them how to fail. That would be it.
Yeah, I love that. That's obviously one of my big staples for why I built this new brand is through understanding that failure is part of a process, not a end result. And I think that's something that's so underutilized in coaching, because I'm wondering, when people get to you, when you get your athletes, how many of them have actually ever been taught about failure and how to overcome it to some extent?
It's definitely different for everyone.
Yeah.
I've got an athlete right now. It's because I'm definitely, and I know this when I'm approaching my athletes, is that I'm a type of coach that they haven't really encountered before, because I'm very sarcastic. More often than not, I'm acting more along as their friend, just trying to have conversation, trying to understand who they are. So a lot of the time when they first get to me, they're very reserved, and there's a lot of things that they feel like they can't say to a coach, but they can say to me, and I try to get that across, because it's one of those things to where that there's so much that goes on in life, and if you're a leader and an athlete doesn't feel like he feels comfortable telling you about what's going 75% of their life, if they don't feel comfortable telling you, like, what they did Friday night or all these things, then how are you possibly going to reach them? Like, I want to hear the good with the bad and let them know that if they do some things wrong, I'm not going to, completely vilify them. Everyone makes it. You're 18 to 22. You're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. Just learn from them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I find myself coaching similarly, where, I'm trying to be a friend while being a leader and a mentor. But I want them to be able to open up to me, because I agree with you that the best way to get through to people is to have them be, I guess, part of your inner circle, part of your friends group.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they'll be able to tell you that hey, I messed up on this, or I didn't get a good grade on my test. And then you can then, okay, well then what do we need to do to rectify the situation? Where if they didn't trust you, they wouldn't tell you these things. So, and then, so you mentioned with the sport is the failure piece. Do you feel like that is the exact same thing for when it comes to teaching them about life, or is there a different area in which you feel on the life path? Because obviously as a college coach, you just mentioned it, you want to be part of their life, not just their coach. You're trying to make an impact on them from a athletic standpoint, but then also as a person standpoint. What do you feel is the focus for you there?
So this is funny. Like I said, that I wasn't in the mental state that I needed to be to completely benefit from our master's program. And one of the things is that I'm not very good at reading physical books or ebooks, or I'm just not good at it. And I space out. I don't know. That's one thing that I wish I could be better at, but I'm not there right now. But once I found Audible, one of the books that my recommended was Team of Teams, and I look back and that was one of our required readings in the program, and I had the book, but I listened to it on Audible, and the thing that for that if because this is such a tough topic to talk about in a short time, but if
Yeah.
I had to condense it as much as possible, is that with social media, everything that's going on in the world, we deal with problems as if they're not complex, and everything in life is complex, and people are looking to be efficient in their time when it comes to training in baseball. They're looking to be efficient in their time in life, when necessarily A plus B plus C is not going to equal D, or 2 plus 2 isn't always going to equal 4 in life. Those type of things. Is that because they're looking to be like, Clayton Kershaw, he does this program, so I should do this program. Certain thing, and that applies to anything in life, because everyone's like, oh, if you can't read, you're not going to be successful. That was a big toll on me personally, because I kept trying to sit there and read, and a little bit, I feel like I have massive ADD. I'm just like, but as soon as I found Audible, I wrote about that in my blog, that's when things really started turning for me, because I was able to, obviously I'm not obtaining everything that I'm listening to, but I'm retaining way more than I did when I was not reading. So that just finding that learning process and understanding that life is just complex. There's never going to be an answer. I'm never going to give you a foolproof answer to that, to where that you can take something and run with it. And I think a good book to read off that too is, I just read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things, is that people see that one thing that tipped them over the edge is of the magic pill. No, that's just, There was an amount of stuff before that, and that's what tipped you over.
No, I love that. And I totally agree that the complexity of things really gets people. And The Tipping Point was fantastic. I love that book, because that kind of feeds into line with where I'm going with some of these podcast episodes that I want to do, is everybody sees these people when they get to the top. They get to these great places. We look at the Bill Belichick's and the Tom Brady's and the all-time greats, and we're like, man, I want to be that person. Well, do you know what it took to get to be that person, and how much work they put in, and how complex and how difficult and how many different things they had to sacrifice to make that happen? And we lose sight of the little stuff that adds up over time, and we just see the end result of what people are, and not the process of how to get there. And I think that kind of goes in line with what you were talking about there with the complexity of things, is that I can't give you the answer, but I can point you in some certain directions that'll allow you to get your own answer. And I think that's huge for kids, as well as adults, as you're continuing to move through some of these difficult stuff and progress yourself. So, what do you feel is how do you motivate or push your athletes to be their best? What's your go-to?
That's a tough one. I guess to point in one direction is that I try to hold myself accountable with them. I try to get them to hold me accountable on certain things, because I feel that if they can call me out on some stuff, that they're going to be more comfortable with me calling them out on some stuff. And that's one of the things, is that, like, when it comes to coaching styles and everything, like, I'm really edgy, because, right now, even today, that, like, imagine if a player called another coach fat, right? That most coaches wouldn't take that well, because they don't have that, sort of thing, and blah, blah. But me personally, I embrace that. I want them to, I'm their strength coach. I should be in better shape, all these things, because I'm doing great in a lot of areas to be a good coach for them, but I definitely could be in better shape. And that's another journey that I'm on right now, is learning how to eat right with the schedule that I'm on and all these different things. So I completely embrace them calling me fat and certain these things and stuff like that. It's not that's just one edgy point that I'd like to bring up. But so that when they're holding me accountable, and that we have that back and forth on something that's not a part of baseball. Now, when I'm calling them out in competition of certain things, like, you got to catch that ball better, or those, original cues that you hear most coaches saying, is that they take that as a challenge, and they're like, all right, I'm going to prove you wrong. Because we're having that friendly competition in all other aspects of life. It's not just on a baseball field. They don't feel like that there's nothing behind that. It's the conversation between transactional and transformational. Because if I'm just saying that I want you to be a better baseball player, obviously, because that benefits me as a coach, I'm going to be able to keep my job. But if I'm over here and I'm helping a guy, lose weight for baseball and have a healthy body, still helping him with, I understand that I care about them as a person. And that was another thing last year, is that a guy who had he started out real hot as a freshman, and all the way up until his senior year, he was diving, and you could tell he was struggling a little bit mentally. But we became really good friends and helped him understand to fall back in love with training, and he lost 30 pounds.
Oh wow, that's
and
awesome.
that means so much to me. That's why I coach. That's a reason of why I coach, because I want to be that transformational coach, and that there's so many different things, because I'm the strength coach. That's my field. I want them to love working out when they leave the school, because I feel like that's a huge part of life.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think too often we get coaches who make exercise not enjoyable, which then when you're done being pushed and told to exercise, you don't. Like you said about running, poles are bad. So when you're done playing ball, you're like, I'm not going to run poles. Why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit on my butt, and I might lift some weight and get strong, but that conditioning piece and that cardio piece is valuable. It's important. And
Well,
if it was more enjoyable.
Now we're talking about complexity again.
Mm-hmm.
Heart problems runs in my family.
Okay.
So how am I going to tell myself I'm not running? I got to keep my heart strong. I want to have a long life with my wife. So I got to keep that heart strong.
Right.
Now, why are we completely ignoring that fact with our athletes? We're going to be coaching athletes that have history of heart problems in their family. Right. So,
or diabetes, or any other number of things that can.
That's another thing too, and it's so much easier than years before, because how many players have Apple Watches? A good amount, decent amount have Apple Watches, and you just ask them, what's your resting heart rate?
Mm-hmm.
If it's in 60s, 70s, probably a good idea to have them do a little more HIIT cardio or something like that. That's going to, not detrimental to their baseball, but putting them in the right direction.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. I think that's an awesome point to the complexity of things, but also to the direction we need to continue to move people and athletes and long-term health and those types of things. So, what have you noticed about the athletes at your school when it comes to, I guess, more or less the buy-in to doing the hard thing? Because I think that's something else that's lost along the way, is when we have these great goals and these aspirations to be at a certain level in life, but a lot of times the end result is more glamorous than the process to get there. And so how do you navigate pushing your athletes through the difficult stuff, and how has that process been for you?
This has been by far the easiest process for me on that front, because of how great of a place Maryville is. We're in the mountains, so when it comes to holistic living and being able to get away from things, it's so easy for me. I get to go run in a beautiful forest, trail run, do all these things, so that makes it very easy on my front. Whenever guys want to get away and have a good time out, they can go to Knoxville. It's less than a half hour away. Nice. So recruiting has been very easy for me personally, because awesome. in other places, I had a tougher time, because I have such a strong moral compass. If that I don't feel like it's the right place for you, I'm gonna have a really tough time selling it. Like, I just don't want to be that guy if I don't think it's the right spot for you. But here, I definitely feel like there's so many people that could benefit from, having the ability to, if you're having a tough time mentally, get away, go to the mountains, have a nice long walk. But then again, if you want to have a good time with friends, you can go to a University of Tennessee football game and those sort of things. So, kind of went down a recruiting pitch there, but
No, that's honestly, that sounds very appealing to me myself. So,
Mhm.
I love that idea of being able to find some level of peace for yourself, whether it's like you said in the woods or in the city or wherever you need to be to stay engaged when the time gets tough. You have that break that you can make happen for yourself, which is crucial. So, I got one more question here, and I think this is a good one for a lot of the kids that I work with because I work with a lot of high school kids. But if a young athlete were to come up to you and ask, what's the most important thing that they could do to prepare them to be a college athlete? What would you tell them is top of the list?
Hmm. I always get in trouble with this one because I think there's so few people out there that truly appreciate movement like we do. I think there's not enough people out there to say that like you need to get that movement down right, like because that's when it comes to strength conditioning and private sectors, that's not necessarily going to sell because you don't see the benefits right away. Um, but strength conditioning for sure is the biggest thing because when it comes to being a college athlete, you got to have that baseline of performance numbers. It's the easiest by far for pitching. You got to be able to touch 80 on the mound for 95% of our pitchers. We do have some that are not there, but the majority of them, you got to touch 80. You got to be able to hit a ball over 90. I mean, there's definitely outliers that don't do that and that are in our program, but definitely if you want to have that chance to go to college, I would say strength conditioning and getting that baseline strength starting in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I had this conversation just the other day, actually, that you have these parents these days and these kids that are like, oh, $60 for a pitching lesson. Yeah, let's sign me up for that. I want to learn how to pitch, or a hitting lesson or whatever it may be. But then, a strength and conditioning coach goes $200 a month for 3 times a week. And they're like, that's too expensive. And I'm like sitting here going, what's the point of knowing mechanically how to pitch if you still throw 48? Like if you don't have anything behind it and you don't have an engine to drive it, then all of these mechanics just turn into you being a really soft player. And that goes for all sports. I mean, you see all these people getting these lessons for skill specific stuff and they lose sight of the broader picture.
Well, let me try to tie everything that we talked into about that specific topic. Is that so now those parents that are paying for that $60 hitting lesson and Johnny goes 3 for 4 at the plate the next day. What do they see the hitting lesson as that tipping point?
Yeah.
When in all reality, you look at the whole picture, Johnny may have gotten 8 hours of sleep for the first time in 2 weeks, and that was the tipping point. And there's tons of people out there that are starting to understand that there's so many different and my hope is in the next 10, 20 years that's where private sector goes, and that you guys, and I think it is, especially with like Whoop and these sort of things, that there's way more external factors to actually show the parents and their athletes that like what we're doing is setting you up for the long run. You're not going to see these short-term gains. You're not going to gain 8 miles an hour on your fastball in 6 weeks. You're not going to do these certain things. But we are doing what's going to help you be successful for the rest of your life.
Yeah, no, I think that's crucial is understanding that if you can slow it down, in the end, it's going to speed you up. So you may see a large jump by doing X program, but if your large jump turns into a injury and then a 6-month setback, and you're actually behind your process when you started the X program, but program Y over here is going to take you 3 years, but you're never going to be hurt. You're going to consistently get better. And over time, you're going to surpass that big jump that you had initially with X, but Y took longer. I think you're going to start to see less injuries, healthier, stronger players, and better careers and life after playing too. So I totally agree with you on that aspect for sure. What I want to do now is if anybody wants to get a hold of you, is there somewhere that they can reach out? Do you have a specific avenue you'd prefer people to, if they try to connect with you, go through on your end?
I'm pretty active on Twitter.
Okay.
You can just, my direct messages are open there. You go to Maryville College, my web email is on there. But if you get me through any social media platform, I'll give you my number or any of those sort of things for sure.
Okay. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes for everybody so that they can connect with you if they have any questions or want to talk a little bit more about some of the topics we went into today. Because obviously, like you said, these are things that we could talk about for a long time and still not touch all of the avenues that we want to get into when it comes to the complexity of the topics that we're trying to get into. So I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I do appreciate you coming on and sharing some insight into what you got going on, and really excited for my listeners to hear some of the stuff that you got to say. So
I appreciate you having me on, and for the conversations that I hope everyone's having.
Oh, absolutely.
Podcast. So
yeah, no. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Until next time, this is the Edge of Greatness podcast. Keep reaching for the stars, fall flat on your face, but no matter what happens, always get up. Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and join us again next time as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But no matter what happens, remember, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please take a moment now to subscribe, rate, and review our show. We are all on the edge of greatness.